All right, pleasant good afternoon to everyone. It's my privilege to welcome us once again to this discussion program in our series from the Dr. AMRIE MORRIS-PATTERSON G.I.F.T Foundation. That's the Grief Intervention and Freedom from Trauma Foundation. We have been having this series for several months now, well, over a year, and it's approaching 2 years. And really want to appreciate those who have been supporting us over the year plus, and those who have been attending in person, online, and we trust that it has been a blessing. Some of the things that we do, we may not see the immediate seeds, the immediate results, but we're sowing seeds, right? So we press on, and we have been supported from the very beginning from some very, very kind and qualified individuals who have given us of their time, their expertise, their knowledge, their experience, largely in the field of mental health, right, and other related fields that we have been looking at. This afternoon, we are privileged once again to have two such persons. One is new and one is a repeat guest, panelist. Today, this afternoon, we have, I can't resist saying pastor, I don't know. Pastor Edward Smith, ordained minister and counselor, you might say counselor of counselors. All right, quite qualified to deliver this afternoon. And with him, we have Mrs. Heather Richards McCalman, and she's a counseling psychologist and education officer. Unfortunately, we received a cancellation from Dr. Providence, who, due to not feeling well, she was not able to join us for this afternoon's discussion, but we look forward to having her at another time. All right, so we're going to go into this very challenging topic. We have touched on it in other terms, more direct terms. We have looked at grief in particular, and we have looked at trauma. Hurt, this topic came about actually from something that somebody said to me some months ago. And the person was basically reflecting on the fact that there are a lot of persons who are walking around like normal people, but who have, very deep-seated hurt, you might say resentment, various types of issues that are really, troubling them. And they look fine otherwise, but when you engage in certain discussions like we tend to have when in church or elsewhere, it could just be persons talking, and after, when you get to those kinds of discussions, then things kind of come to the fore, or come to the surface somewhat. All right, so the person said to me, this is something that we need to try and address. So the term hurt, I'm going to rely on the experts. I use the term hurt probably in a very loose, general, layperson kind of way. So we'll clarify what exactly is hurt. People use it very loosely. But let's see if we can get a bit more precise definition of that. And just this week, as tends to happen when we have these programs, my antennas are up, looking for anecdotes, stories, real life situations. And I came across, or something came across my screen this week, maybe literally, and it was a story of a woman who her mother was a drug addict, right? And very early in her life, her mother basically pimped her out. So she grew up in that kind of lifestyle, where she was herself, caught up in this lifestyle of prostitution, and it's almost as if when she was trying to release herself from that, it kept drawing her back. And she just felt very helpless, and it was just this cycle of trusting and getting hurt and that kind of thing. And you ask yourself, Can you blame her? You know, to what extent is she responsible for how her life has turned out? Right? And there are many, many examples. Maybe if I took a little poll of the small audience we have here, we might get, various stories of people being hurt. And you hear nowadays, I hear the term a lot now, church hurt. You hear it quite a bit. And I know of situations where right in the church, we're supposed to be as we might say, a safe space or a safe haven. Sometimes it's not so safe, and we have to face that reality as well. In schools, sometimes you have teachers being abusive or, otherwise, causing hurt to students. So in various situations that we are all aware of, you have persons getting hurt short, medium, long term. All right, so let's get into our discussion for this evening and hear from our panelists. I don't know if we want to give some initial comments or want to get right to the questions. Our initial questions are, what are some of the causes? I've mentioned a couple examples, but give us a sort of an overview, generally speaking. What are some of the causes of hurt from your training as well as from experience as counselors? What do you find? That's whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
As you mentioned, as you mentioned just now, people are walking around. I remember some time ago, a sister came and told me, she asked this other sister while in Kingston, how are you doing? And the sister responded with a whole marathon of concerns. And eventually she had to say, but I just asked you that question, but I was busy on my journey. But she said, but you asked me how I'm doing, I'm telling you. And indeed, a lot of people are walking around with a lot of hurt. And I get the impression we are going beyond physical hurt today to emotional hurt, which is sometimes feeling of sadness, distress, anguish, and you can go on and name it, and there are other emotional strains, such as being in a difficult situation, people depriving you of privileges and other opportunities. These things can cause very severe hurt, emotional hurt. And in contrast to physical hurt, which is you can pinpoint on some part of your body, emotional hurt can mimic some of these hurt, but it goes beyond and it goes deeper to being hurt inside, which can, in many cases, take a lifetime to heal. And a lot of it is sometimes as a result of childhood hurt, which we're going to look at also.
Very well said. Good afternoon, everybody. Sister Hazel, how are you? Good to see you. It's my first time coming into this church. I would have driven up and down here several times. I didn't realize that here is where Maranatha is. So I'm really happy to be here, fellowshipping with you this afternoon. Thank you, Elder Patterson and the church for the invitation. All right, so yes, this topic is a very topical discussion. And when we talk about hurt, anything that hurt brings what? What do we feel when we get hurt? Let's think physical now. We feel pain, isn't that true? Right? So hurt really has to do, when we are talking about hurt in this sense, we are not necessarily focusing so much on physical hurt that you would feel maybe if you get a spank, if you get a cut, or if something else of that nature happens to you, to your physical body. But while it implies that in a different sense, in some sense, we are more talking about pain to the psyche, right? And our psyche has to do with our thoughts, our mind, our thinking. And we have it all inside there. And it's painful, and it's causing a lot of adverse reactions. Now, as my counterpart, Pastor Smith would have said, he gave some examples of causes, but I would just like to maybe break it down, just to add a little bit more. The heart has no boundaries. It can happen to anybody, children as well as adults, right? Children experience a lot of hurt, right? and in the world of psychology, they are referred to as adverse childhood experiences. So these hurt that they experience they are as a result of things that would have happened that are adverse conditions. So, for instance, abuse of any form, physical, sexual, emotional, neglect, the whole works. Parental separation. Parents divorced and separated for one reason or another. Parents are imprisoned, incarcerated, financial hardship. Look, today, the church has done a very wonderful thing, to reach out to members of the community. I'm not saying that they're experiencing financial hardship, but we know how it is now back to school, and it's a lot of money to send kids to school today. Many parents are not able, to do that because they're experiencing financial hardship, which affect the children. Emotional, we have neglect, and let me just pay attention to my note here. Okay, I would have mentioned some already, but even outside of children, generally speaking, adults experience hurt for things such as breakup. So a relationship goes bad, goes sour. Loss of job, life changes. Okay, there are many things that cause changes. Maybe relocation, you move for one reason or another, right? Social exclusion, you are not included within a group, be it in church or even in your workplace, and many others. So I will stop here for now, but there are lots of causes, some of only which that I would have mentioned this afternoon.
Yeah, and I would like to add some pathways wherein we can assess or where hurt, that kind of emotional hurt is expressed. And I have several here: emotional awareness, emotional expression, emotional experiencing, and cognitive appraisal. And when you talk about emotional expression, it's of course how one expresses their hurt, the way they express it emotionally. How much the feeling is expressed and how much the feeling is suppressed. So while they're sharing, they can express the feeling, but as a counselor, you will also be able to identify the suppressing of feeling and emotional experiencing, deeply accessing and reflecting. So you assess while you're listening, the person is experiencing the hurt while they're speaking, and they're reflecting on the hurt. And then for them to adapt to their present situation and cope with their present situation, they tend to have these emotional experiences going back in the mind. Then you have emotional awareness, recognizing and differentiating feelings such as sadness, shame, grief. As the element mentioned a while ago, these things are people experience hurt in these experiences. And finally, cognitive appraisal, interpreting experiences as threatening and harmful to one's psychological well-being. So they appraise it, the hurt, whether it is to the extent to which it's hurting them, to the extent to which it is harmful to them, to the extent to which it is dangerous, even deadly. So we call it emotional or cognitive appraisal. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks much. Okay. Yes.
I just would like to add, two more maybe that we didn't mention, maybe 2 or 3 more that's common. Workplace stress. Can anybody identify? I can, yeah. Right? Workplace stress. Stigma and discrimination, right? You're sidelined, you're discriminated against for one reason or another. And feelings of inadequacy. Some people don't feel that they can measure up. You never feel that you're good enough. You always feel less than. And so these are some of the other causes of pain and hurt.
All right, now we touched on quite a few examples there in terms of causes. And I want to zero in a bit more on you mentioned that it can happen, hurt can take place throughout your lifespan. It could be a child, or it could be young person, or adult. But I want to focus in on the child aspect because, you know, is it, maybe I should ask the question, is it that more of an issue for children you have found, or it's more of an issue for adults? Because it then says we need to pay a lot of attention to what we are doing, how we are nurturing or not nurturing children in particular, so that they grow and are able to, you know, overcome a lot of these adverse situations that they face. I mean, the children are growing up in a lot of children. I don't have stats, right? But children are growing up in some situations that you really feel it for them, you know, and you wish you could have, you know, that's one of the things that my wife used to talk about in terms of, for example, having a home for children who are, you know, neglected or abused. There are some facilities available, but I don't know if those are adequate, you know. So there seems to be need for addressing adverse childhood, you know, experiences in particular, because I am looking at a newspaper article here, and I like to keep it practical as much as possible or relevant. So this was one of the recent newspapers. One of the headlines said, "Young males dominate the prison population." All right? And this, the acting superintendent of prisons said, almost 90% of the 209 inmates of the prison system here who had attended a secondary school dropped out of school in Form 2 and 3. All right? So you have 209 of the inmates who are in prison who attended secondary school. 90% of them would have dropped out by Form 3. Now, we don't know all the circumstances, but it would seem that, you know, there are causes and effects of that as well. Yep. You know, and how do we're a small society, you know, we shouldn't be affording that. You know, that's something that has repercussions now for the crime situation. You know, these are able-bodied young men who should be adding to the productivity of the country, but here you have them potentially, and the thing, you know, once you get into the prison system, sometimes a lot of people just continue in a cycle of crime. So how do we even begin to address that? Do we need to go into the prisons more to try to, you know, deal with them there? Do we need to deal with it from the maybe primary school, secondary school system? What is it saying about the home environment that is causing these young men that I mean, if I have a son and he's, 12, 13, I'm not expecting him to be dropping out of school. You know, I remember a parent saying, in regarding to, well, actually it was a young man and a young woman. Well, I can't go with him. At 12 and 13, parents, mothers in particular, are saying that they can't manage them. And some get quite rebellious at that age, and the parents just kind of, you know, throw up their hands almost. I've said a lot. I'm just, you know, where do we start?
I have been associated with that, being in a school system as a counselor also. And I have said it over and over. Not only doesn't our family prepare for our boys, our society in general doesn't cater for boys and young men. And that is why you have such a large percentage of dropouts. The educational system caters mostly for girls. And one of the examples is that probably over 90% of the teachers are women. And these women are not trained to help boys who are truant, who might be difficult, have behavior problems. And the school system is not prepared for it either, to deal with these boys. So eventually, and I've seen it in my experience, the principal gets tired of dealing with the situation, teachers back out of it, parents surrender to it, and then the boy is left on his own. And he has no other choice than to go and try and make it out there. And however he could make it, he makes it. Whether it is getting a trade to loan, getting a job somewhere, and many times falling in the wrong company, and so they go the other way. So that is one of the reasons why why our boys are like that. When I was studying to be a counselor, I did my studies for my research in the prison as to why, because for the same situation, so many young men, the reason as to why so many of our young men are in prison. So my research was directed to young men up under age 35 in the prison and as to why they become delinquent. And it was overwhelming. They were not cared for. A lot of people say the loud music and the disco, and those are small matters as far as the boys are concerned. The family environment, the communal system, the community system affects young men. They are not able to cope with it, and so they do it in whatever ways they can.
Yes, and I totally agree with you, Pastor. But just to add, is that, well, just to support what you said, we recently conducted a survey for a project, a study that we are doing from the Ministry of Education standpoint. And it is really pointing to, some of the things you said there in terms of most of our teachers in the classroom, insofar as boys are concerned. I'm not going to speak about boys only, but boys are of special interest because we know they are the ones that are filling up the prisons. Those are the ones that we would tend to see on the streets. When we look at the street children, I can't remember seeing a girl. I've seen an adult, we've seen adult females on the street, but not the girls. So the boys are of special concern. And one of the things is that our classrooms are filled with female teachers who do not necessarily know how to socialize and how to train boys. And also because girls tend to be more favored by teachers than boys. So for instance, if a boy, this is what this survey is showing, if a girl goes and tell a lie on a boy, miss, he hit me first. The teacher will tend to believe the girl right away and then start to instill disciplinary measures against the boy, whereas it may not necessarily be true. On the other hand, if the boy does the same, the teachers tend to be more dismissive. That's just one small aspect. So the survey, as a matter of fact, the study is talking about, how to really, the essence of it, how to be fair to boys in the school system, in the classroom. So very interesting. But, it is just sad to say that as it relates to children on a whole, it is coming from a whole cycle of ill parenting, dysfunction in families, where we have missing fathers for the most part, missing parents. We have a lot of single-parent households. And we know what the research has said. Where there are two parents within a home, children will tend to be raised, in a better way. So we see that dysfunction coming out. Yesterday, while I was on my way home, I saw some more psychological abuse than anything else on a child. What it seems to be, the mother or the grandmother grabbed the child and she said, "Come here." And she pulled the child, tugged the child, and she administered, as we would say, start thumping the child. And I just couldn't help but feel sorry. But because she was in that mood, I had to use tact. I didn't want to approach her unless I get some of the thumps, right? So, the abuse and so on that we see, the physical and the other wise abuse, is a cycle that needs to be broken, and we see it, a lot.
And you mentioned adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences is detrimental and particularly significant because of the emotional hurt, one, but two, that kind of trauma hits home in the family, mostly. The family and the immediate community. So adverse childhood experiences are experiences that occurred in the child's experience while in the home, among family members, and in the immediate community. And that is why it is so detrimental to the child. And because it is so detrimental, the long-term effect on the child is more adverse. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. These are things that are long-term. So they experience the adverse situations at home and in the immediate community. It's mostly in the family, 90% or more in the family, the adverse experiences, such as, I have a few here, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, parental separation, substance abuse, mental illness, domestic violence. These issues that occur, not so much outside, but inside. So when the child experiences these, they tend to grow up with emotional difficulties, cognitive disturbances, and in the long term as adults, and I have had a lot, I counsel a lot of people. I used to, I haven't done a lot of recently since I have stepped aside somewhat, but a lot of adults are depressed. A lot of them have PTSD. A lot of them suffer from anxiety. I mean, I have a term here I really want to share with you. I must look for it because it's not coming to me right now. Poly-victimization.
Is it poly-victimization?
Yes.
Okay.
That they experience as a result of that. So what is it? It is because of the multiple traumatic experiences that the child had as a child and grew up with it. And they tend to react easily to these situations.
And actually that is what I mentioned earlier, one of the things that prompted this program, because somebody in a discussion we were having at church, somebody mentioned something and the person started to cry. This is a big man, eh? Right. The person started to tear up, right? And you could see that he was reflecting on something that happened when he actually talked about it. Something that happened in his childhood. And he was saying, well, maybe, if such and such had happened, then his life would have turned out, better than it has, and that kind of thing. And it really, you could see the pain was still there. So it says, I don't know, I feel it for counselors. I am not a counselor professionally, but it just seems to me from interacting with counselors over the years that we underestimate to some extent, what is involved in counseling properly, right? I'm not just talking you just giving advice to your friend. I'm talking about professional counseling. There seems to be a lack of counselors. I see a lot of people, used to hear about a lot of persons doing psychology in college, but that is not counseling. You need advanced, qualifications.
Correct.
So it seems also there's a lack of professional counselors within the school system. I know schools where I used to do a little mentoring, and there might be one, maybe two counselors for hundreds of students. With all the issues that are taking place with these young people, I don't see how two counselors going to really, deal with all those. And then on top of that, you have, I'm thinking maybe the teachers, but then the teachers will say, well, my plate full. I have so many things to do with already.
And they do they do say that.
So it's something you said a while ago points to, and Mr. McCalman as well, points to this phrase I've heard. I don't know how true it, you'll tell me how true it is. Hurt people hurt people.
Hurting people.
Yeah. Right, people who have been hurt people. Yeah. You want to expand on that, or how do we unpack that?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm going to say something about that, but just because I think this part of the discussion is very important, where Brother Smith, Pastor Smith would have shared here some of the, we go a long way, shared some of the effects of hurt. And you mentioned the person where something was said and the person just started to cry. There are lots of people who are going around suffering in silence, children as well as adults. And it only takes one little thing to break them. And that is what you may have seen there. And, we think of people like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and those psychologists and so on. We know we do not necessarily have to take everything that they said that they would have shared, but there are some truth to some things. Because you see people sometimes, and Sigmund Freud talks about it, that what you see, is really the tip of the iceberg. But submerged beneath is really the real story, and there are things hidden. Carl Jung talks about them being as back matter. Sometimes they are suppressed, and it only takes a little thing, to bring it to the fore. So, I'm really interested in that, because that is the crux of the matter, where we have people who are hurting, and because they do not necessarily understand what is happening to them, because they are suffering in silence, they are not reaching out. It goes on, and then it can lead to what you were saying there just now. Somebody who's hurt, not having been helped, in one way or another, they haven't spoken about it, they're internalizing it, then it comes out the wrong way in many cases, because it is unresolved. So you're hurt, it's a misery-like company, I am angry, I am aggressive because of what's going on inside of me. So how then do I manifest what is inside of me? I just act it out. And then people in the way get hurt one way or another.
No, I'm going to draw this might be a drastic or it's a fresh example, but I think it speaks somewhat to what you're saying, and there's a question I have behind it. Now, it might have been last week or this week, there was a story out of Guyana of a husband who shot and killed his wife. And son, well, the son didn't die, but you could say it's attempted murder. He shot his 10-year-old son as well. Now, this is coming into the public, knowledge after some time, I don't know how long, repeated abuse, right? And the wife would have left the home, and he would have been still pursuing her, and it ended now that, he has committed murder, killed his wife, the mother of his child, and, killed himself as well, right? He shot himself, and he was trying to kill the son as well. And I'm thinking to myself, as we're talking about hurt people, I am not giving any excuse for what he did, right? But I'm just thinking, what really happened with him? There are some people who are just evil, right? They're just wicked, right? And they will do things in spite of knowing better, right? But I'm just wondering, what may have happened. Maybe I should leave that for the psychologist to, you can't analyze him now because he did, right? But here you have it, this woman who maybe tried to give him a second chance, or, no, I think she had left the home and she had probably decided, no, that was it, I'm not giving you no more chance. And he figured, well, I can't have you maybe, so nobody else will, that kind of, sick thinking. And here you have a young man now, this is the cycle now coming up, potentially. The son now, assuming he survives, is going to live with the knowledge that his father is not there, his father is dead, his mother is dead, and it is because of the father killing his mother and attempting to kill him. How do you even begin to counsel a young man like that? Maybe at this stage right now, he's not really able to process the whole thing. As he gets older, it's potentially going to be more difficult. Yeah?
But we mentioned hurting people tend to hurt others. But one of the enigmas of the whole sequence is that hurting people many times are polarized and attracted to persons who hurt. So I might have been abused when I was small, hurting, and that lady out there might have been abused also when she was small and hurting, and for some reason or the other we become attracted to each other. And for up to, it still befunds psychologists how it happens. How are people like this attracted to each other? And what happens then is they have repeated abuse in that family. In that family, it goes on and on and on.
You know, Elder, my husband and I were discussing that same case, you know, and can't remember if I shared it openly with him. I think I did. I said, it's going to be two things for that young child as he becomes an adult. I said to my husband, if he doesn't even just need brief therapy of 3 months counseling, he needs deep psychotherapy. Because this is trauma. It's a traumatic situation for him that he's going to be reliving. Now he's going to be experiencing a multiplicity of emotions. You know, anger, sadness, grief, you know, and all of the things that come with it. So if intervention doesn't happen for him early and effectively, right, then we can see another story, another side of the coin. And that is why Jesus would have to be the only hope for that boy becoming, you know, a functional adult back into society. And we know that once God steps in, then the positive outcome is possible. Let us say he refuses to accept, you know, salvation, because sometimes people get vexed with God, you know. Why? You know, and I mean, we'll come to that. So if he becomes, you know, he chooses the negative path, then we can see that he would repeat, because he has a vendetta. He has something that he needs to repay. My mother was killed, you know, in a like this. So then anything, if I kill you, you know, as my wife, if you upset me or my girlfriend, that's okay. You know, it's life for life, right? So he can relive that same experience, but it can go both ways. If he gets proper therapy early, by God's grace, he can become functional again.
All right, so I'm glad you touched that, because our next question is hinged on or related to that, in that how do we avoid harboring adverse effects of hurt for prolonged periods? All right, so you mentioned you know, salvation, the power of the gospel to change people, to transform people, and we believe in that because we are looking at this from a Christian psychological, you know, perspective. Yes. But while we're doing that, right, and we believe in the power of prayer and grace, for some persons it seems as though it may take a long time. All right, I guess depending on the nature of the intensity of the hurt. What is it, I know counselors have their various ways of dealing with these things, maybe tricks of the trade, I don't know what you call them. But I know counseling is a tedious process, all right? So how do you know, help persons to not prolong the healing process too much? How do you help them to navigate that over not just weeks, but months, years, yeah?
Well, let me say that most times hurt doesn't occur on a one-time onset experience. Hurt takes place over years. And when you talk to adults who are going through that psychological experience still, they will tell you, I was abused up to 14, 16. By the time they're adult, they can stand on their own, sometime a little earlier than 18, and so they walk away. But hurt takes years. That kind of traumatic experience doesn't happen overnight. It therefore means that unlike the system that we have here, because the system in our country, I don't know if they believe or just accept or want the quick fix. So when I was counseling at a school, for example, when a teacher sends a child to me, they expect when the child walked out of the office, the child to be whole. But they have been having that problem for years. And I try to explain to the teachers, you cannot expect them to be free of it in one session. Exactly. Because many times, what I have to do as a counselor is not help the person to change, but help the person to cope. Why? Because the problem that they're having is in the home. It is manifested in the school. But when they leave the school system, where they manifest their problems, they're going back to the problem. Are you with me? Yeah. So the thing is, how am I going to help them? So counseling is not just changing. Counseling is also helping to cope in a situation. And that's really hard because in many cases, young people who have not developed psychologically enough has to pretend that this is so, when in truth and fact, it is not. So the coping. So counseling is not a one-on experience. It took years for it to occur, the hurt to occur. It will take a while. I wouldn't say years as in Freud. Freud said you need an equal amount of years and so on. But at least, if the problem is deeply ingrained, we need at least 3 months with the client who has accepted, and I want to underline the word, accepted the need for counseling.
Indeed, and well, you know, it is, well, for us, we are trained to take care of ourselves as well as therapists, because we have all of these things being unloaded onto us, and we can't speak, we can't share, we have to keep it. We have to keep it to ourselves, right? But of course, yes, we find our way, you know, the counselor has to find a way, you know, to find that release as well. So one of the big things is that confidentiality, where you promise that to the client, and you must be true to that, right? When a client comes to you, a client who is hurt, you know, one of the first things, well, I'm sharing from experience now, you know, after we would have established, you know, everything and we are ready to begin, one of the first things I tell them, it's a process. You know, it is not a product approach. It is not going to happen overnight, that change that you're looking for. And it is within you. You know, we are just facilitators of your change. So people tend to think that counselors give advice and counselors tell clients what to do. It is, the opposite is really the truth, right? We just facilitate by asking the right questions and leading the client in the right way. And we do some social work too. Well, I do some social work in my therapy as well. Sometimes you may have to leave your office and go out with the client, or, you know, you have to be able to point the client into the right direction. You will not have everything within your space that the client will need for healing and for growth. So you have to have that, you know, that sort of information. But I say to the client, I give reassurance, you know, that, you know, especially if I know that, and there would be more than likely cases that are similar to the things that would have happened, you know, maybe other clients that I would have seen, I would say something like, you know, you are going to get past this, and I do not do I know the literature says, oh, we shouldn't include religion in our counseling. That's what the psychologists them say. And I sometimes I lecture a course at UE. For 2 years I haven't done so, but I would say to my students, there are some things in that I'm sharing with you that I do not believe. And when I reach the part that I don't believe, I say I don't believe this. It is up to you if you want to keep it or not. Because I cannot do my therapy without it being led by God, right? And many times, I can tell you, my dear brothers and sisters, I know it's God who is telling me what to say, what questions to ask, where to lead the client. It can't be me, you know? And so I would reassure them that you can get past this, you know? And we're going to work together, and by God's grace, that's the first thing I would say. And in addition to that now, I would teach them, you know, over time, the techniques, you know, that are some of the techniques that I would have learned. One of them that is very useful, one theory is the cognitive behavioral therapy, which you call CBT, that teaches the relationship between thoughts and behavior and feelings. There is a direct relationship between the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave, right? And so we use techniques from that. It's too long to go into all of them, but one of them that I like a lot is something that is called thought stopping, right? Another person might call it, you know, automatic thoughts behavior. Our automatic thoughts are what, because, you know, we are born in sin and shaped in iniquity. So it is quick and easy and natural for us to think how? Positive or negative? Negative. So they are our automatic thoughts. But You teach the first thoughts that would come to a client in distress who is hurt are the negative ones. The anger, the depression, the frustration, the thoughts, suicidal tendencies and thoughts, the thoughts of harming and hurting perpetrators, right? So you teach them how to change negative thought patterns and processes and to replace them with alternative, positive, God-fearing ones. And they do that over time, and you make it practical in relation to what they are experiencing. The objective would be for them to decrease the negative thoughts and behaviors that come with the adverse situation that they would have experienced, right? And once you teach them that, you track them, you know, I would say to my clients, I am not a talk therapist. You have to meet, you have to work. But it's not anything difficult that you can't do. I ask my clients to bring a book. They have to bring a book to therapy. They have to bring a pen. They take notes that they can read to keep them while they're not seeing me for the week. Words of encouragement based on the therapy, based on the Bible. And so you reassure your client, and you can get past this, and you walk with them, and you track their progress over time. You know, sorry, it's very dear to me. I'm actually seeing it happening. But nothing is too difficult. Once God is in it and God is in your practice, you can help your clients.
Just say, Elder, that apart from the cognitive approach to helping the client, as my sister mentioned, there's one that is becoming very popular, very effective. I haven't seen it much here, but mindfulness therapy. Mindfulness therapy is what we call humanistic. Cognitive is cognitive, do we think, psychological, but mindfulness is kind of humanistic in that it relies on the human person. It requires psychological strength too, you know, but you focus a lot on the human will to change. And in as much as it is secular and humanistic, I find that I have found the link in Scripture. Because what mindfulness does, it helps the person to cope in the now. So you bring them from yesterday, and you help them not to go into tomorrow and sentence their way of thought. As I said, it is also psychological to some extent, but you help them to focus their thoughts and patterns in the now, living in the present. And I say there's a biblical connection because Christ taught it in Matthew chapter 6, where he said, do not be mindful about tomorrow. He didn't go into the details of yesterday and tomorrow, but he focused on, he might have said yesterday, but the disciples missed it. You know, it's possible. It might have, because Christ is the author of all counseling techniques. And mindfulness I find it very effective because it helps the person to focus on the present. How can I improve myself now? But let me just say here that, because I guess we're going into healing, the healing process. It is two-pronged as far as I approach. One, the secular or the psychological, which is 7th stage. But I also believe that as Christians and as a church, we have to focus on reconciliation, forgiveness, and reconciliation, confession, forgiveness. And that is what I brought here with me. But just briefly, the 7 steps for counseling, helping awareness, helping the person to become aware that they have a need. They have a lacking something inside of themselves and they have a need. 2, acceptance, accepting the fact that I am like this and I need something else, the process of change. Helping the person to let go, release of pent-up feelings, that's 4. Then help the person to grow and change. So growth has to have change in it when it comes to that voluntary counseling process. Help them to grow and then help them to integrate. Number 6, integration, going back into society, living a normal life, cognitively, thinking clearly, and 7, transforming. Seeing the life being transformed in the society. So but it has a lot of details into it. That is just the basic.
Yes, thank you so much. You mentioned forgiveness, and I was, well, that's actually the last question. I should have probably brought it up earlier, in terms of the role of forgiveness. You know, sometimes when you really consider, is it fair to ask people to forgive under all circumstances as part of their healing process? I'm jumping because time is running out, but I want to touch on that briefly. The role of forgiveness in healing from hurt. Is it fair, or at what point do you even begin to ask somebody to forgive somebody who really intentionally, deliberately, maybe over a prolonged period, hurt them very deeply, right? How do you do that? How do you advise them?
Well, the thing about it is that, truthfully speaking, for many clients, it is not something that is easy to a place that is easy to get to. And I mean, it's realistic. And if as humans and as therapists we can't say that, then, something is wrong. So for me, you actually have to counsel the person about forgiveness before they could actually get to that point. For each client, it may be different, but for many clients, you have to teach them what it's about, where it's from. You have to show them the relationship. You have to show them what are the benefits, as it relates to the situation that the perpetrator, what they would have experienced. And then I have had situations where I've said to my clients, go and think about it for the week. When you come back next week, tell me what you think. If you think you can, and, if you're ready. So it's not something you push a client into. Many times it takes time because the heart is deep, the client's story is his story. But it is something that is recommended, it's something that is positive, and it has a lot of benefits for the client who's feeling the pain. And I've seen clients who would have made the turnaround and consistent with the research, they stop experiencing, some of the psychosomatic symptoms that they've experienced. Psychosomatic symptoms are sometimes you feel pain, headache, dizziness, muscle pain, muscle tension. You go to the doctor, all sorts of things are happening to you physically, and the doctor cannot. I know my dear late colleague, she and I used to work very well together, Dr. Patterson. And, we talk a lot about these things. There are really no real reason, physical reason. When you do check, it is psychological. Once you are settled up there, then you find that you're going to have a release of these physical manifestations that no doctor can tell you why it is happening to you. Your mood would be elevated. You're going to feel, because you have that release, and of course, because you are complying with what God has asked you, especially if you're a Christian, and you know what the Bible says. Because we know that there are Christians who are really grappling with forgiveness, right within our very own churches. And no matter how many messages they hear, they are not ready, they are not deciding to give up. So yeah,
I want to,
very important.
Thanks for that. I want to just maybe get a little clarification here, right? When you say you forgive somebody, does this mean that there are no consequences for the person? You understand what I mean? So, an example. So somebody's raped, all right? Is it possible for the victim to forgive, is it possible for the victim to forgive the perpetrator and still the consequences are meted out to the perpetrator? If you understand what I mean?
Yeah, well, let me say that the preparation I made for today is not based on what I've just said, but what I want to say on that matter. But so I may take 5 minutes to clear the point, make the point I'm making. But before I do that, let me say that everyone who might be listening, including us, can be a counselor. You may not be professionally trained, but the most effective technique in counseling is listening. And in counseling, we call it active listening. And basically, paying attention to the body language of the person and the body language that you manifest. Pay attention to all that the person is saying. Listen actively. Try your best not to judge the person. Try not to interrupt while the person is speaking. And try to show that you understand where the person's experience is coming from. That is not based on forgiveness. That is based on you being a counselor in as far as you can listen to what the person is saying. Because I'll tell you this, there are a lot of people who have issues in their lives. If only they get somebody to listen to them, tell that story, it is like taking a big part of that mountain off of their shoulders. So as a listener, your steps toward becoming a counselor has begun. But on the matter of forgiveness and so on, Elder, it has to be a process. Hurt has taken place. Hurt may have taken place over a matter of years, so it cannot be done today. There must be a process.
I'm going to interrupt you just a quick moment, because I've heard Christians say, right, you're a Christian. It means that our Father prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So you must forgive right away. Right? You must forgive immediately. Otherwise, you're not truly, being a believer. Right? Your forgiveness must be swift, must be very quick. All right? So continue.
Yeah, and I want to interject also that if husbands and wives who have issues in their lives were to adopt what I am going to suggest, if I get the time to say everything, they can forgive each other and don't go to the divorce court. Do not go to the divorce court. Because the big issue in separation of marriage and dissolution of marriage is forgiveness, And let me say this, brethren, 1/3, and you can check it out for yourself. I tried my best when I first heard about it. 1/3 of Christ's ministry on this earth either address directly or indirectly the matter of forgiveness. When you read the Gospels, you'll see for yourself. 1/3 of his ministry on earth, whether it was said or not said, dealt with forgiveness. So we must understand that forgiveness is so impacting on the Christian life that it has to be part of our lives. So there must be a coming together, which is the first step. The two parties, or whoever the parties are, have to come together. And the first thing to do is try to share common ground. What is that? We are here to what? Reconcile. Forgiveness doesn't come immediately. Reconciliation has to take place first. So we come to reconcile. And in reconciling, there must be common understanding. Common what? Understanding. There must be a common ground. There must be a common interest. And we must have a desire for a common future, because the problem could arise again tomorrow. Yeah. And there must be the determination for a common vision. So reconciliation begins. Forgiveness didn't take place yet, but reconciliation. Then we begin by sharing the facts. After all, the council establishes all of this. This is in the church now, I'm zeroing. This is spiritual. Counseling is not always spiritual, but in spiritual and Christian counseling, that's what we're talking about. Then when we have come to a common ground, we begin to share the facts. And I want to say here, everything must be placed on the table. Sometimes we hear people say, don't say that, it might hurt the person, make the person start to cry. No. When we come together and we begin to share the facts, all the facts must be placed on the table. So as a counselor, what I do when I have family therapy like this is that I establish ground rules. Because when the facts begin to share, people can get hurt again. And I've seen it happen. So I ask for ground rules, like do not interrupt, no cursing, no swearing, no hitting. I have things like that. I ask for them to share and agree upon. So there must be, and after sharing the facts, we share the feelings. Sharing the facts, one, share the feelings. The person must be able to tell how much they were hurt. Sometimes people avoid talking about how much they were hurt, because they break down. That hurting feeling make people break down, so they're afraid to talk about it. But as a counselor, you're helping the person to share their feelings, share how they felt. I'm just going to brief it. Then the other thing they must do is share the vision. I mentioned it briefly just now. The case, is how could we get it together for tomorrow and beyond. So when husband and wife have their problem, they must share a vision. As from today, how are we going to do it? And they must stick to it. And then they can come together, which is what I call integration. Now they integrate. After sharing the feeling, sharing the heart, sharing the vision, sharing the facts, they come together now for a common future. And here is where confession, repentance, and forgiveness will take place. So after all this sharing, give me 1 more minute. After all this sharing, they must come together now for the spiritual process now begin, in depth, the deep part of the spiritual process. Confession, repentance, forgiveness. Then after the person share all the facts and the feelings and the vision is shared and they confess, they must now agree for a common future.
Yeah, very well. I wasn't going to interrupt, I was just supporting what you're saying there, Pastor. Right? But,
my last point is on the actual forgiveness, but I will leave it till you finish.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just to kind of address the question directly that you asked, which is very practical to the situation, whether within churches or homes. Should forgiveness be instantaneous, and are there consequences or not? I can't remember reading in the Bible. If there is, please tell me. But I can't remember reading where the word of the Lord said, tell us when to forgive. Say forgive 1 week after, 2 weeks after, a year after. What I do remember is that it says 70 times 7, right? I remember that very well. And if we are practicing the model of Christ, we should be ready and willing to forgive immediately.
We have to.
I am not saying that that is what happens. That's why we have to counsel people, because people are at different places in their minds and how they see things. But God expects us to forgive instantaneously, right? And that is what I would really push. And when I say push, we don't push our clients. We don't tell them what to do, because we want them to own their decisions. Yeah. But that is how I see it. In terms of consequences, the act has already happened. It has already borne its consequences to the victim and to the perpetrator, be it imprisonment, be it, whatever. It cannot be undone. The consequences are there. And you can forgive somebody and your heart is clean. You can have a relationship with the person, but it may not necessarily get back to that same point A where it was, where you all were like chummy. That closeness. And I mean, once you don't bear any hatred in your heart for the person or any resentment, and you can relate to the person in a God-fearing way. If you do not get back chummy, I don't think that God will hold. But that to me, that is just practical. So the consequences exist.
That is why you have the process of sharing facts, feeling, and vision. Because when you share the vision, you're saying, tomorrow this is how we're going to be. That's the point I made. When you share the vision, it's a vision for tomorrow. So whatever that vision is, you're sharing it. So if we're not going to be chummy, that's the vision. But if that's hypocritical. So if you're going to be chummy, you share it also. Because confession is the beginning of forgiveness, The Bible says if we confess our sins, what? He's faithful and just to forgive. If you don't confess, you don't get forgiveness. And I tell people that all the time. So people will say, I forgive him. How did you forgive him? You forgive yourself. Because forgiveness goes both ways. We forgive ourselves and we forgive the other person. Now, the hurt begins to be healed when we forgive ourselves. So when we forgive ourselves now, we don't get that burden like we normally have when we're stressed out. Because we are forgiven ourselves. I am no longer going to hold it against the person. But the person has not been forgiven as yet. Because the Bible says if we confess, if we what? Confess. So forgiveness comes, the precursor to forgiveness is for confession. So in the counseling session, that individual comes to you and confess all their wrongs.
So let me ask a little follow-up here. Let me ask, so what about a situation where the person has wronged you? I give the example of a rape victim, right? Graphic example. But that victim you're saying that the victim should forgive the perpetrator, right?
Yes.
But the perpetrator has not acknowledged
That's what the Bible says.
the wrong that they have done. And maybe you might actually not want the victim to have any interaction with the perpetrator. Right? It may not be practical and it may not be advisable. So how does that victim, within themselves or by themselves, can they still forgive the perpetrator and be at peace with that, without that perpetrator having acknowledged, confessed to the wrong that they did? You know, that's based on what you just said.
The thing is, if I am not sorry for my sin, I cannot get forgiveness for it. So if the perpetrator is not sorry, they have not gotten forgiveness. As I said, what has happened is that the individual, the victim, can forgive him or herself for the pain that was inflicted. You talk about cognitive feelings, the whole idea of feeling. How did I feel? I will no longer feel this way, so I'm going to forgive myself for the feeling. Not that it was a sin necessarily, but they want to get rid of that burden. And the forgiveness, just like Jesus Christ, until we call on him, forgiveness is there. It is there. He has already made the provision for forgiveness out there. But it is not mine until I confess my sins to him. Am I speaking the truth? It is not. Forgiveness is given when it is asked for. Forgiveness is not given if it is not asked for. God is not going to forgive us if we don't ask for forgiveness, because you see, confession has to come before forgiveness. We have to confess. And that is where we share the facts and the feelings and the vision. I hurt you. I did you wrong. Elaborate what has happened. This is what I did to you. As painful as it was, talk about it. And then, I am now sorry for what I have done to you. And based on my thoughts for tomorrow, I want us to have a good relationship. So I am asking you, now let me get a lot of hurt still. So it may not happen overnight, as somebody mentioned. It can happen because Christ has made the provision. That's what he did for us.
I want to wrap up with this question. I've touched a lot, and you'll realize that there are depths,
Yes.
there's levels to the hurt people. It takes time. All right, but this issue, right? What do you say to people whose pain one and lose faith in people? So it's like, you know, so there's a level of distrust across the board, maybe, in terms of your relationships. How do you, guide people in terms of that? They don't maybe give up on God on the one hand, and they don't trust people, Yeah.
Well, one of the first things that somebody who's experiencing hurt is that there is hope. Once you are living, you can get beyond this. I have to tell them how. It's through, by God's grace and power, once you allow God, whether through the counselor, through, another person, you can get through this. So you kind of like give them that reassurance. They can get past this difficulty. Now you have to, I am here to support you through this. So you have to give them that sort of assurance of support, because assurance and support is very, very important for people who are going through the trauma and the fault they're experiencing. As a therapist and, pastor, just provide warmth. We have to provide warmth. We have Now, sometimes people do not want sympathy. People can get offended in a situation if you provide sympathy. Because sometimes sympathy may come across as that I am weak. And you let the person know that, I can imagine, because you're not really in the person's body and mind experiencing any situation. But I can only imagine what you're going to help the person, effectively, and to guide them maybe in a direction where they would really start. Maybe a pastor, maybe a trusted friend. The person must see that you're and for me, I find it is important, I mentioned this before, is disclosure, person's location, especially if it's persons in St. Vincent. But sharing similar situations and sharing, what this person was able to overcome, then, by God's grace, you can do the same. And something I find very useful too, if you have person's stories from your own self, that you can share, it's called self-disclosure. Done with tactfully and at the right time, so the client can say, really? I realized that Sister McCallman had a similar, let us say I was a teen mom, and you're coming to me and you're telling me, oh, you're hurt because you're impregnated by somebody, who was who was supposed to be, entrusted with your care as a teen. Don't worry, you would get past this. Look at my life. What am I? I'm a counseling psychologist, I'm an education officer. You think I got here easily? I was a teen mom too. And you take them through your own process. Do not over-disclose. You don't want to go and tell the client all your business and then make it become about you. It must always remain about the client who needs the help, right? So self-disclosure and sharing about similar situations, that can help. And you share further information about where the client can get further support. Like I said before, counselors need to have information, and other persons, not your counselor, about where you can point people. Maybe the person needs to go to the social welfare. Maybe the person needs to go, to some other agency where they could get, the kind of help that they are seeking, right? And of clients, I pray to start my session, but not without their permission. And most of the times I tell, right? And I would say to them, look at our bodies. What does the Bible say? Most of them would be able to write the word mind, draw a line, and put matter underneath. So it means that God is saying it is the matter. But God has put your brain at the top so you can be able to control.
And when depression takes over, the person who is so much interest attached to that hurt, it drives them to their grave. When a person about $1 million, they have lost interest. So one of the things we do as counselors, as Sister rightly said, we help them to come in, and the medication has to come in, and so on. So through the state of relating to it, and coming to terms with it, and letting it go. It's not easy to do.
They will do some therapy there, hot, cold, thing, massage, and they'll give you some exercises to do. But then you have to go home, and you're supposed to. I found that the extent to which, and that injury was pretty what you said about repeated, therapy sessions in terms of counseling, and eat as best as I could, eat well, eat healthy, and doing some of the stretches and exercises at home, important. And therapy, not in the strict formal sense, as you said, talk therapy, self-talk. It says also that each one of us here has a role to play in helping each other to heal.
Yeah.
That's right. The things that we say to each other can be therapeutic, right, can help people to heal. So therefore, what Jesus says, by your words you shall be approved or condemned, So we have to then be careful of the things that we say to people. They can be healing words, or they can be hurting words that drives a person further into into hurt state. And therefore, worship sessions are supposed to be healing sessions. Worship services can be healing, or part of people's healing. So this goes way beyond. We really have not. There's so much to explore with this. We might have to have a part 2. But I really want to thank our panelists for sharing once again from the wealth of knowledge, experience, practical counseling, advice. You can't pay for this. No. All right, our counselors, I believe, are underpaid. But we really thank God for them and how He has been using them, and we pray His blessings on their ministries, because that's really, I see counseling as ministry. Very, very important. So thanks again. Thanks to those who have been watching online. Take care until the next installment of this discussion series. God bless, and we will see everyone again soon.